All right, welcome back again. This is the continuation of the last stream where we talked about working in the drag and drop. We kind of went over and played around with the drag and drop event handling system that we added to a couple of images in a mock-up, testbed project. And I think toward the end of that, we decided that we would only need the to implement the interface for the this here, the IN drag handler event handler. Basically, when the dragging ends, um, that's basically what we needed. It seems to be working. What I did was I went ahead and implemented the code for this. I started off by just logging out a couple of objects, and I wrote some code here that essentially, well, this is the key code here. First of all, we're just getting game objects back. We're not able to really extract anything else out of it at this point, except that it's a game object, and we have the tag of the objects. Now we know all our tags where the actual player items are stored in the inventory system are S1, capital S, S1 through capital S26, which corresponds to index values 0 through 25 in our player inventory arrays. So knowing that, basically I wrote a function, private function here in this script. The script is, I named the script player inventory image event handler, a little bit different than what we had in the mock-up stream last time. And so this function here is going to return a Boolean, which the variable I'm using is called bValidated. And what it's going to do is validate the tag name that's passed in, whether it's an actual legitimate tag for one of the inventory items, the S1 through S26. So it goes through this block of code here, and I mean, you can freeze this if you're watching it later and take a look at it and really go through. But essentially what I'm checking for, we know that they all begin with a capital S, so I'm extracting out from the tag substring starting at position 0 of the, basically is the beginning point in the first letter, and comparing it to make sure it's a capital S. And if that's true, it jumps into this if here, and then we have two different checks. If the remaining substring length is 1, then we do this check here. If the remaining substring is 2, then we do that substring there. Now, the value that we receive from the substring, or the remaining substring, is basically going to be, it's numbers left. Once you take off the capital S, we basically are left with, out of the tag name, a number that's ranging from 1 to 26. So knowing that, while it's doing this test and tracking this out, I went ahead and decided to use that remaining tag name to convert it to an int and store it in a variable called index. Initially, I set the index to -1. The index is going to be a number that we're going to directly use to reference the player inventory array. And so we want to get that index value by extracting it from the tag name. Now we know that our tags are 1 higher than the actual index that it relates to. So for example, index value 0 in our player inventory array is actually S1, which is 1 higher than 0. So in the end here, if it's not validated, I reset it back to a -1, which means it's an invalid index value, because the index values for our array is going to be 0 through 25. But if it is valid, then it'll do this, and it subtracts 1 to index minus equals 1. And I got a note here, array is 0 based, unlike the tag names for player inventory items. So we're going to subtract 1 from whatever index value we extracted out of here, and that's only if it's been validated. If it has not been validated, it just sets it to -1, and we return the bValidated Boolean. Now index, if you notice, I have this special keyword out here, and with traditional functions, you can return a value. If you're using a simple value like this, like a bool, which is what I'm using, you can only return one value. By using the out keyword, what that means is the variable that's passed into this function as a second parameter will receive the result of index, and it'll go back out of the function into the variable that's passed in, so it can be utilized. And you see, I set up these ints right here, the drag index, underscore drag index, and drop index. So we're going to have two different indexes, the drag index, which is going to be our, the starting point of the drag operation, and then we have a drop index. Both set to -1, which would invalidate the index values. That's something we're using internally to represent it, but it's traditionally used in arrays to indicate an index value that's not valid, unless you have an index that, for whatever reason, the range was set up in the negative range, which is very rarely ever done. So anyways, in our implementation, -1 or any number less than 0 would indicate an invalid index value. And then I set up two booleans, bdrag and bdrop, set them to false initially. Now, the way this function is called that we wrote, this is player item object, is we say bdrag, which is going to be our object that's being dragged, equals is player item object, pass that function name, and we pass in the tag of the drag operation. And that comes from the event data that's passed in here into the onDrag event handler. See right here is event data, which is of type pointer event data. So event data dot, and we determined in our previous stream that pointer drag was a reference to the object that's being dragged while the left mouse button is being held down. That's a game object. So every game object has a tag property, and that's the tag property that we set before in our player inventory screen. So so we pass in that tag, which hopefully is going to be S1 through S26, one of those values. And then we do this out. Now this outward, which we saw in the function that we were calling, anytime you use that out, it has to match on the function call as well. So we put out, and underscore drag index is the variable that we created here that will be passed into this function, and the index value that was calculated is placed in that drag index and returned back through the out modifier here. So we'll have a value in there when it comes out, and we'll also have a value in bdrag, which can then be checked. So now to get the drop index, that needed a little more work. As you can see, it's basically this stuff right here. And first of all, we found out that there was on the event data that's passed in, there's a list object, list of game objects that are stored in a property called hovered. And so, since it's a list, it has its own property called count. And so the first thing you do is check, is the hovered.count value greater than 0? So if it is, then then we're going to have some game objects in that hovered list. So that means basically that we're hovering over, as we're dragging, we're hovering over certain objects, and when it's released. Now this is the on end drag. So when you end your drag, when you release, whatever objects are underneath there, it'll get it. Now these Unity is smart enough to give you all the objects, not just the one that's closest to the surface of your view. Anything that on the UI that is underneath it, like the panels and boxes, anything else we had, the canvas, will show up in there. And I saw that when I looked at these debug statements I had generated, I was able to see the list. I created basically an object list and printed that out. So which we don't need anymore, because we can just take these out. I've kind of modified this internal code so the object list itself, which was being built here, this object list variable is meaningless. And so anyways, so we go through using a for each statement. We go through and we say for each game object, and we're going to use variable G to represent each game object. In the event data.hovered list, we want to do this. We want to use the isPlayerItemObject function we wrote, passing in G, which is a game object, dot tag, passing its tag. And this time we're wanting to get out the drop index, not the drag index, but the drop, because this is we're looking for the item it was dropped on, or the image it was dropped on. So we can use, we're gonna, again, it's for our swap. We need to start the initial and the final indexes so we can do the swap. And so we do a check that if B drop, which means if B drop wound up being true, that this was in fact a valid game object like S1 through S26, then we want to break out of this for each loop. We want to keep processing it and modify the index value that we just found for the drop index that was valid. So we wound up breaking out of this for each, which then bypasses the else, because that's only done if this part was not true. And so we jump down here, and then I do a quick check. If the B drag and B drop, so basically if we were able to successfully extract a B drag index value and a B drop index value, then we know we have two good values. And then right now where I left it off at with this code is it just writes out debug.log attempting swap of player inventory items, and I list out the value of drag index and drop index. And that's where it's at right now. So really what we're going to do in this section of the code here is swap these index values. Actually swap the items in the array for these index values. So we're going to basically be swapping these values, and we need to get access to our player inventory array. So we may wind up doing, because we're going to write a swap function where we can pass in these index values as parameter 1 and 2. You know, the drag index, drop index, we'll pass those in, and inside that swap function it'll actually do what it needs to do to swap the items in the array. And then of course, like we talked about before, we already have our player inventory. Let's close that. We don't need spawn locations. There we go, UI player inventory. This display player inventory, if we look here, it's actually called, well actually no, it's not called every frame. I take that back. We're only yeah, we only call it one time when we display the inventory. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to do something similar to this, and basically just get, you know, we'll write a swap function that we can access through this player inventory manager reference. We'll create similar code, but call a swap function first, and then turn around and call display player inventory to redisplay that inventory once it's been swapped. So we can reuse, you know, this code that we've written, display player inventory, over and over as anytime we need to redisplay it, you know, if the order or sorting order has changed of our items. So for now, let's go ahead and do this. I want to run, I'm going to do some additional testing. Now I did some testing and it seemed to be working out fine. And so I'm going to show you that we're going to watch the output here in the console and show you. Let's pop up our inventory. So we've got our mouse locked, which is great. I like that, worked out great. Anyway, so this here is it's S1. This box here is S1, S2, S3, S4, S5, S6 down here. Then it goes S7, 8, 9, 10, and this is S11 through 26. So if I were to click on this first one, I'm going to left click and hold, which is S1, and I were to drag, say, down to here and let go on this one, which is S6, the index values of those should be 0 for S1 and 5 for S6. So we let go, and if you look, attempting right here in our logger, attempting swap of player inventory items 0 and 5. So it is doing that correctly. So let's keep going with the same one. We know this is 0. We said this should be, it's S7, but it's index value 6. So swapping 0 and 6, it's correct. This here, this should be 9, 0 and 9. Of course, our last one is 25. So if you grab this and click there, it's going to swap items 0. So we're getting the correct index values, and that's key. The first thing is to know that you're always getting the correct index values that you're going to then use to reference your array. So let's try something in the middle here. Let's try, if this is 25 here, this is 24, 23, 22. Let's drop that over to, let's say, over here, which on the left, this should be our 5, index value 5. So yeah, 22 will be swapped with 5. So we could do 22 with 6, 22 with 7, 22 with 8, 22 and 9. Now it's kind of hard for you to see because, you know, I'm actually clicking and letting go on the item when I go there, but you're not able to see or feel the click, obviously. But you're going to have to trust me in that. When we do the actual swap, I'd like to do some kind of animation so we can see it dragging and all that and swap, you know. So, but now let's do an example where, let's clear the log. So we got to clear. Where we click here, this is 0. Let's say I click out here and drop outside of the box. Let's see what happens. I didn't try that earlier. Let's see what happens. It's doing nothing. I let go and did nothing. It basically invalidated or never executed the end drag. Now if I drag it, let's say just inside our border box here. Let's go to this corner so you can see it easier. I'm going to put the pointer as close as I can to the corner and drop. Still doesn't do it. Still doesn't do it. Still not doing it. And that's perfect. It's actually, well, that was a spawn. I thought something, that was our spawning objects. In the background, you can see items spawning there a little bit. But those will show up in the log too. Yeah, so the way since we only implemented the interface for drag end on our objects, S1 through S26, and let's expand it out so you can see. Here's the clone of the U, which is generated in real time. So if we click S1, you can see here what I added is what we did in the previous stream. We were playing around with the two images. I added the event trigger, which was just, and I didn't have to add any new event types. I just added the event trigger, so that script is there, which will trigger those events that we need to write the interface for. And then I attached this player inventory image event handler script that I wrote to the image. And I attached both of those. If you look at S2, same thing. We've got each of these have the exact same script. So it's sharing all the functionality. That's why you write it once, you apply it to objects of the same type. You need that same functionality, and it works. I mean, it's great the way you can reuse the code like that and the way it interacts. And that's standard object-oriented stuff, but I mean, it's kind of, I've never developed a game before, but it's kind of neat to see how this stuff interacts and works together. So I'm fairly pleased with the way this is turning out and the way this is progressing. I knew the player inventory overall was going to take a little longer just because of the various things that needed to happen beforehand. Like we need to be able to pick up items, we need to be able to set up collisions, you know, with those items before that, trigger those events, and then to be able to pick up an item, show the glow when you're in the zone, and remove the item off the scene, and add it to the player inventory array. That's the data portion that's tracked behind the scenes, and then of course writing functionality that can display. You know, it's been a process, but we're getting closer and closer to the end here, and so it looks like we're going to finish our drag and drop today for sure. Definitely. So this is 0, 1, 2, primary weapon to secondary weapon, 2 to 5. Now we're going to put in some special checks so that these items cannot be swapped around. you know, like attachments can only be in attachments. We'll have to, these are going to be special. Just like we treated it special when we were adding them into the inventory before in the array, we're going to need to treat the drag and drop special for these ones right here, because we're going to have to check the category of the item that's being dragged and dropped to make sure that that category of item can actually drop into that slot. Now, it may be possible, like we have a weapon here or an attachment, we can drag it and we allow it to go into any one of these other slots, the quick slots or the extra slots. But if there's an item already there, if it's an empty one, it's fine. We can just drag it and drop it in there, and that's fine. But if there's already an item there, we need to make sure that when we drag and we try to drop it, that the item that's being dropped on is an item that can in fact be swapped and put in its place. For example, if we had the silencers go up here in this first block 0, if we had more than one silencer style, then we would have to make sure that the only thing that you could do if you were taking a silencer and dragging it into your inventory is drop it in an empty slot or onto another silencer that could swap out. So, you know, there's some additional logic. We'll work on that. The main thing we want to do is get where it's swapping items. So I'm not concerned about checking for that kind of stuff initially. We'll just get it swapping the items and switching the indexes correctly when we do that, the actual values. So anyways, that's where we're at. So let's get started on that. I think it's going to be pretty straightforward, and I think we're going to get it working fairly quickly, to be honest with you. I think it's really going to be quick. So let's do this. Stop that. Let's go to our code. And so let's go to our player. That's our event handler. There. This is where we're eventually going to come to this drag and drop, where we're going to actually swap the items. But we need to go to our player inventory manager. And see, this is where we have, this is our array here. It's player inventory. It's actually underscore INV. But that's the array that we're going to swap the index, the elements in. So it is a static array, and it's listed as private, which means we're not going to have direct access to it. Now the class is public. We can get access to the class, but we're not going to get access to the private array. It's been kind of tucked away, hidden to be protected within this script only, and it's used internally here. So what we're going to have to do is set up a swap function here that's public that will allow us to swap those two items in the internal array. So, and I think we want to return some kind of success value. So we're going to start with the public keyword. We're going to return a bool. So it's going to be a logical bool, true or false, whether it was successful or not. And we can just call it swap. I could call it swap items, but I don't know. For some reason, I like to spell it all out, so there's no confusion if there was another swap items function somewhere else. This is clearly for the player inventory items. And so we need the int. We need the drag index, int drop index. So we need those two index values, drag and drop. Like I said, initially we're just going to swap them. So let's declare our bool be return value, or let's call it success. Was it successful? Be success equals false. And then so we're going to have to create a temporary variable to hold the one that we're going to swap to. So for example, if we take the drag index and we just copy that data to the drop index, well, we've overwritten the drop index data. So we need to have a temporary holding place for the destination first before we copy the source. And then once the source is copied to the destination, we can copy the temporary back to the source, if that makes sense. So step one, let's say step one, save destination data to temp var. So we'll say, let's look at our player inventory. So player inventory array is of type player inventory. So we're going to create just a single item, player PL, if I can type, player inventory, we'll just call it temp, equals new player inventory. And let me check something else out. Okay, I just want to make sure, because I knew item was a subclass that's inside player inventory, and I wanted to make sure that it was, in fact, set up where it was creating a new instance of this. Otherwise, we get a null object, and then we'd have a problem when we try to copy the destination data to the source temporary variable, to the temporary variable. By not doing this new keyword, if you just declare this, knowing that it's a class, it doesn't allocate. C# does not allocate any memory for the data to be held. What it allocates when you do this is a 32-bit with the segment 32-bit offset, what they call segment and offset. So it's or maybe 16, 32 bits total, but it's declaring a it depends on the OS actually what the bit size is, but it's declaring a segment and offset address into memory, which is basically just the equivalent of a single memory location, and not a series of bytes to hold the entire size of the data. So when you do this with the new keyword, that behind the scenes, if you don't know anything about programming and instantiating objects and things like that, behind the scenes, it's basically cleaning up or clearing out a space for memory and setting it up specifically for that item. So I wanted to make sure that was there so we don't have any issues. Stack count is just a simple variable, just an integer. So you don't do any new keyword with that. It's a simple data type. It's built in. You always do this with your class variables. When you create a class, which is multiple data items, you have to do this. So anyway, so we have all that set up. Okay, so we'll just say temp is equal to, and this is going to be real easy. You're going to be so surprised how easy it is. It's going to be equal to the drop index. So all we do is assign, because they're both inventory, again, is an array of player inventory items or elements. And when you index, what's called indexing or accessing an individual element of an array, you put the index element between these square brackets, and that will return just that single element of the array, kind of like a slice out of a pie. It's just getting that one item, which we can store that one item in our temporary variable that we've created, which is a single item. It's not an array. An array would have two brackets like that after the type when you first define it. But we're not doing that. And normally you'd have a size after here, not the parentheses. You would, in brackets, put the size. If you don't know what the size is initially, you don't even initialize it at all. You just do player inventory, bracket, temp, semicolon, leave it at that, and then you later would get the size and reallocate it. Anyways, that's what we do. So we've now saved, with those two lines of code, we've saved the destination data to a temp var. So now step 2, copy source. We're going to just say source and destination, meaning the source and drag index to the destination drop index. Copy source to destination. And I spelled copy wrong. And so let's copy this. And so the source is going to be the actually it's going to be the drag index. So we can say, no, sometimes I copy and paste too much, just doesn't make sense. Okay, so that's step 2, copy source. And we say inventory. Whoops, I had it backwards. Because we're assigning the drag values or item in this array. We're assigning the drag, that means to be on the right, to the drop. Yeah, the drop is the destination, which will be on the left. So this gets assigned to this, and that's what we want. We want to take the drag index, put it in the drop index. Now, step 3. Copy temp to source. Which is our drag. Copy the source, which is the drag, to the destination. I'll just put that so it's clear with the drop. So inventory, drag index equals temp. And okay, and what I'm going to do, I'll explain this in a little bit here. Let's see. What am I? I'm trying to remember the. Google search something really quick. Let's try catching something in C#. And okay, it's exception E is what I'm trying to look for. EX exception E. Okay. And we might need to bring in system. So we're not even using collections. Let's get rid of that. And we'll debug.log error. We'll just say swap error e dot we'll just display out the message, which is the human readable. The exception is the actual exception code, but okay, so and actually there is a step 4. Change Boolean flag var to success. And so we'll just say B success equals true. And okay, the way this try catch works, and let me finish this out real quick. Return B success. Okay, so the way this try catch works is in the try block, which will have an open close parenthesis, just like you you see in these function calls is you can execute a series of lines of code. If there's an error during any of these lines of code, the instruction pointer that's built in where it's executed, there's a pointer, it's called the instruction pointer, that executes each of these instructions. If it encounters an error trying to execute one of these, it will immediately stop and jump to the catch branch here, and it stores the exception information in this variable called E, and this is the general exception. There's actually other more specific exceptions, but I'm just using the general exception E, and it goes to the catch statement. It executes whatever you need here to catch your errors. So like if your program had an error and you wanted to display something to the user, like during a calculation that there was a divide by zero error or something like that, or something went wrong, you could customize this to using the message and looking at the type, and maybe put up a switch statement in here that goes through the actual message, the exception type, and determine what the error is, and give the user a more precise reason why there was an error. Or you might want to just do what I'm doing, which is just catching the error and moving on. We're not going to display anything to the user. What we're going to do is set the bSuccess Boolean value. Well, that's being returned. So it initially is set to false, and the only way it goes true is if it gets through every single step 1, 2, 3 and gets down to step 4, which we set it to true successfully. If that's successful, it actually bypasses the catch statement, so it never does the error part and just returns bSuccess, which we've set to true as the last statement here. So we'll get either a false or true whether the swap worked or not. And we're going to check that return value, because if it's true, which means we successfully swapped the items, then we'll call that display player inventory function to have it update the screen with the correct ordering of the items. So the swap was not as difficult as it could have been. Okay, so that's that. Now keep in mind, we're in the player inventory image event handler. That's kind of where this is happening. So we're going to have to get a reference to our, let's get back to, what is it, the game controls. Yeah, so we're going to have to access this game controls UI player inventory. We're going to get the inventory manager script, a reference to that, to display that. So this is what we need here. We'll copy that. Copy. Go back to our other script. We're going to need more, but I'm just going to put this in here for now. We're not going to, we're going to say we're going to be updating. Update view to show the current organization of player inventory. And okay, well, let's see if we can do, what is that called? It's called game controls. Game. Yeah, that is defined as static, so we can just do that directly. We don't have to create an instance of game controls. That's nice. I'm glad I set it up that way. I knew it would come in handy. Alright, so that's going to take care of that for us as far as updating that. But now we need to actually check. Let's see. So what we're going to say is if go back to our UI player inventory manager. Okay, so if p inventory dot swap player inventory items, this is where we're going to pass in our underscore drag index, we don't want to get those mixed up. That could be a problem. Underscore drop index. Okay, so if we, and I could have stored, created a variable here, a bool, b success equals pinv dot swap player inventory items, drag and do that on one line, and then do an if b success, then do this code. But as you learn to program and you program more often, especially if it's a value you're just using really one time, you're going to throw it away. We're not going to do much more with it. And anything more that we would do, we would just put inside this block here. We would just, you know, hit enter a few times and enter some more code. You can do it inline like this, which the way the compiler works when it creates your app and this is running, it's going to evaluate this first, what's inside these outer parentheses, and whatever that value is, you know, it'll plug it in to the if part, and so it'll replace that with a true or false and execute your code. So so yeah, that's what we're going to do. So if we successfully swapped items. Okay, one other thing I wanted to do though is, you know, and I didn't run it before to show you, but the function we wrote that's identifying the drag and the drop index, you know, it doesn't care what block you're on, so you could actually drag and drop into the same box. For example, if I click on the left side here and drag it across and then drop, you'll see it's 2 to 2. It's swapping those same items. Or if I do here, even there to there, even just a little bit, 1 to 1. I could do this, drag, keep holding, run all the way around here, and come back to this one and let go. Still 7 to 7. It's matching. So if I drag here and drop there, nothing. So we want to do a quick check. There's one thing we can put in that's fairly straightforward. When we actually call our function, swap player inventory, before we even, let's go back to the player inventory manager. And we can go ahead and say, let's put an if statement here. If drag index equal to drop index, basically if they're the same, return b success. We can just do the return right here. And so what that will do is it's going to return back false, since that's what it was set to. The return b success. It'll never execute any of this code. You know, there was a time when they say it's not correct programming to do all this and to basically break out of the chain. You should always have it execute down to the end and do one return at the end. So we could wrap the if this is equal to that, or just say not equal to this, then do this and let it return. And so it's essentially, what I mean by that is we'll change that and we'll say if drag index is not equal to drop index, then we'll do the try catch block, then and only then, like that. So, and then we return b success at the end. So it initially still set same thing, set the false. If this is not equal to that, then we're going to go through this. Otherwise, it'll just skip it and go there. So we'll just do it that way. That's, you know, they essentially do the same thing. I don't think there's any impact on. Well, I don't want to say there isn't any impact on performance, but when you get down to the nitty-gritty of things, each of these lines of code are compiled into an instruction at the lowest level that the CPU understands. And so when the program is running, you've got these series of instructions that are in memory locations at offsets that are sequentially written out in most cases. And so the instruction, if you have the return up here right away, depending on how long this code block is, the jump from wherever it stops to return out and go back could be longer. When I say the jump, if it goes across a segment offset boundary, it's called a long jump, and so it takes a little bit, slightly longer, less than a blink of an eye for sure, but a lot less. But if you're getting into some performance issues or things where you need to go optimize your code, this is readable this way. There's no question it's going to go through all that, but and then get to the end, and the final success is what's sent back. But if that becomes an issue, you can always come back and optimize the code and look for things like that would shorten the jump. You'd have to have an understanding of machine architecture, internal processor architecture, in the way the instruction pointer works at the assembly level or the the lowest level of instructions that the CPU understands. So keeping this a high-level Unity game development project in C#. Let's just cut that conversation off at that. I don't want to confuse anybody that's number one, a novice programmer or does not know programming at all. Let's just keep it to learning what we learned here, and we're keeping it readable, and I'll document things like I did so you can understand what's going on. All right, so we should essentially have our code written. We have the swap player index, swap player inventory items. We've got that check in here to make sure the index is not the same, which would just save all that code from executing. And later on, we'll come back and in our swap player inventory items, we will probably expand this to include passing the item tags, or I'm sorry, the categories of the drag index category and the drop index category of item. And we'll use those categories to determine, we know that 0 through 6, or slots 1 through 5, S1 through S6, which is index value 0 through 5, can only have certain items, whereas starting with slot 7 through 26, we can swap any kind of items within those areas. It won't matter. We don't have to check anything. So we'll look at doing that in a little bit. Let's just make sure this part works and that we are in fact swapping items. But in order to see that in action, we're going to have to pick up a couple of items and see what happens. Again, I don't know if we're going to run into errors. I don't think we'll need to do anything more, but hey, I always go into this thinking, okay, we've got, a good bulk of this developed and written for this particular functionality we're trying to add, but I always expect not necessarily the worst, but expect something to break here and there, or a minor change that needs to be made. So, all right, let's go back here. Let's go ahead and run this. All right, so we're going to wait here. We're going to try to pick up some inventory. Let's make this bigger so we can see a little easier. All right, so we have some inventory. Pick up. Whoops, I'm hitting the wrong keys here. This is so hard to navigate, I'm telling you. Sensitivity is unreal here with this third-party controller. Okay, so we have some items here. Let's run out here in the open. Set the index. Okay, so we have our silencer that's been loaded, our bat. Let's see, first of all, let's try to drag the silencer over here. Okay, wonderful. So it duplicated the item. So what if we were to drag it here? Ah, see that? Even though you see it here, it's not moving it. You know why? It actually did move it and swapped it to an empty slot, but we didn't clear out the sprite. The sprite is a separate component on this image. It's a separate thing that we're going to need to address. So I knew there'd be at least one bug. But see, the item's actually here. Let's see if we drag it here, what happens. Yeah, see, now it's here, but it's not here because, let's do this. See if we click this to here, you can say attempting swap of player inventory items 1 to 2. It's not doing it. See, it's not dragging. It's acting like these aren't even there. But see, this is here. This is here. Yeah. Okay, now those two work. See how it swapped? Because there was an item there to overwrite the previous image. So it swapped it. When we didn't have nothing, there's no sprite there to swap it. So what we need to do is probably have an empty sprite, possibly. Because I kind of don't like these white boxes anyways like this. I would prefer to have something tinted, maybe in see-through translucent, kind of like we did here. Maybe we'll have a similar item here, like a free zone, something greenish or blue tint. But for the most part, it's working. Like if I take this item in here, drag the first aid to here, yeah, those two items swap. It says it's swapping 8 with 6, and it does in fact work. The way we're going to find out, let's try to memorize what we have here now. This would be the true test. If I hit I to close it, I to bring it back up. Yeah, see, it remembers it because our player inventory array is static. So it doesn't get kind of wiped out. Neither do these sprites. So, but see, so our bats here, our items here, these are actually empty spots. I should be able to take this sprite here. Let's see if I take an empty spot. Put that there. What does it do? Nothing. There's nothing there to swap. If I do this, see, it remembers the same. It's leaving the remnants, the other one. So we got a minor glitch there we need to work out. Let's see. Now we're moving items. So now these items are supposed to be empty. Which they are. That's why it's not swapping it. But the bat is in fact here. Let's bring it here. And this is here. We'll bring it here. Move that back there. That back there. That back there. That back there. Anyway, so we got a minor hiccup. Alright, so let's go back and let's see what our issue is. Where we're going to do that, first of all, we need to see I'll tell you what I would like to do is I'd like to create a small image. Let's see what size our images actually are. I'd like to create an image that's translucent. It's the size of the standard one. It has the word empty slot, basically. Just something that says empty slot. And so at least when we're swapping pictures, it'll swap an image because we have null reference basically, but by having no sprite image in the empty ones, it's a null and it can't really swap it. It's not a one-for-one swap. So let's see what we have here. We got pictures, Unity, art. Next, we're going to have to go into Documents, our Unity projects. Go to our Harvest project, our Assets, our Images. No, that's right. I moved that stuff to Resources, Sprites. Okay, so this is our typical square. Let's see, it's a 256 by 256. So what we're going to do is go into my favorite paint program, GIMP. And we will create like I said, a 256 by 256 transparent background. New. It's going to be 256 by 256. And we want the background to be transparent. Okay. And so now we'll take this text font tool. And let's see. Let's see, what color do we really want it to be? Trying to think what would stand out. Let's jump back to our Unity. Okay, so we have well, actually, our image background is a white block, so I guess it won't matter. We'll have just some black text on there. Let's do that. All right, so we're going to say empty. Empty slot. And let's bold it. Let's make this bigger size. I kind of want to center that text. I don't know if there's any way to do that with this here. With this, well, actually, yeah, I think there was. I just need to highlight that. I think I can right justify, centered, filled, centered. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we want to grab the move tool. We just want to move that somewhat right like this. Okay, so just create a simple image here. File, save as, save it to our Unity. Actually, I think it was in the Unity projects folder. Well, that was one of the first ones. Just save it here, that's fine. Actually, it's called empty slot. All right, then we'll export this. Export as PNG file. And fine. All right, so go back to pictures, Unity projects. And now we're going to be able to drag this and drop it into well, I guess it needs to be in our Sprites folder, really. So let's go back here. Some of the images were from the first game we did, the little Space Invaders. I just kind of did some mock-up things to apply to the cubes, and it was an interesting game. Very simple. This definitely is a more ambitious project going through this, but I'm really wanting to learn a lot of this stuff, so it's taking a lot longer. That other one I was able to do a lot quicker. I think it was 4 or 5 videos. All right, so what am I looking for? Where's my, here it is, empty slot. So let's just drag that and drop it into Sprites. So let's click on that. I'm going to change that to the texture type to Sprite 2D GUI. And what else do we want to do? We want to apply that. There we go. Okay, so now what we're going to need to do let's take a look at our code we have for the player inventory, not the swap here, but when we initialize the player inventory, oh, see, we're not even doing anything here for the image. Maybe that's why it's doing what it was doing on the empty ones. Let's see. Underscore and V C dot sprites equals resources dot load. I know. And the path. So it's going to be a path to our which is sprites slash, and since we know what the name of this one is going to be, we called it empty slot, right? E-M-P-T-Y, just like that, empty slot. All right, so let's run that, see what that does for us. And it didn't show up. I know one time I was having issues, so what I was doing, let's copy this line of code. Yeah, we're adding the item, blah, blah, blah. I think it's in the display inventory function, actually. Yeah, display inventory. Yeah, see right here, we're overwriting it with the item name. So, and loading it. If image sprite is not equal to, so if image like image like define object got component image, if image is equal to null, then see, it's going by the item name. Let's. I'm gonna have to rethink what we're doing here. So, yeah, because if the item name is, that's how it's determining by having an empty thing there, but. We possibly could do here where we assign it. The empty slot, basically, this we'll just load that image in there in the display inventory. So it overwrites the remnants of the one that's left. And it's actually not C, it is print I, inventory I. It's an empty slot, basically. Give it a chance to reload or recompile. Those errors should go away, hopefully. Let's see, all compilers have to be fixed before. Okay, what other show? All right, let's clear that. It's still not. Why is it not doing that there? I'm missing something here in our. Actually, we do want to make sure that we do that. Today is actually the 13th. Oh, I know why it's not working. Let's see, slot number. Yeah, let's just do this because we could move that line of code up here. This way we don't have to reduplicate it. Comment it out here. It's available then before and after the if statement or anywhere. And then we can say, yeah, now image that preserve aspect equals true. And so the img variable is getting the component of the current slot number. If the string is empty, then if it's not equal to empty, that means there's something there. It will actually draw it, and that's when it'll check. So but if it is empty, we still just want to draw the empty slot image. Actually, what it's doing, image equals. Yeah, image.sprite equals resources.load. So yeah, we want to, it's image, not. And it's sprite with a lower s. All right, so let's, I think that's where our error was, because all the items are empty. They're not going to have any item names stored in the array, so therefore it wouldn't even load even an empty image in the slot. So let's see if this works here. All right, so now we got our empty slot. We got rid of that ugly yellow stuff. Now it's showing empty slot in each of those. Great. That's what we wanted. Yep. All right, so we spawned a few items. Let's pick one up. Pick up. Let's view. Boom. Yeah, it just replaces it. That's perfect. That's kind of what I wanted. Oops. P. P. What else we got? Pick up. P. All right, so we picked up a few items. Look into the sunset here. Where's the sunset? That's pretty bright. Let's just go in this blue sky here. Hit inventory. So we got some items to work with now. So now we have something that's looking a little nicer. I like the idea of having the, even if it's empty slot. Well, maybe we can change that black to a kind of a light gray, just a little bit darker than what we're seeing there. So it won't be so, it won't stand out. I'll just say, but we know where the slots are at by having it there. And also, if we made, instead of a transparent background, if we made it a slight, there may be a way to do a slight tint in alpha, you know, change the alpha channel and a little bit, work with some of that. Anyways, so now let's see if we swap items, what's going to happen. It did swap images, but our counts didn't swap correctly. Why is that? Why would our counts not swap correctly? Yeah, so I know what's happening. I think the data is correct on the back end. See, on the ones that are empty, we're actually just drawing the image here. We have to go ahead and update the stack count as well. And so that's this here. See, now we're getting into copying a lot of code, which I don't like. So actually, what I'm going to do we're going to copy all of this, because it's really all of this is going to be the same. If, yeah, so let's copy this. C. And this is basically, because all it's really displaying is the image and the count. So let's create a function here, another function. private void call it update item UI pass that code in there. Okay, so what we need to get passed in though is well, since we're now reusing this code, we can pass in two things. We need the item name, so we need a string item name. And int slot number. So we're going to change this to be that the image is here. Takes care of that. This here, we're just needing the item name, so item name. Slot num there. Okay, if I is greater than 5, so we need to know the index. And we also need well, that may be it. Let's start with that. Let's update these. This I is going to become underscore index. Index. Underscore slot num. Underscore slot num. This is underscore index. Alright, so this way we could pass in a few values and reuse that block of code. It'll customize it based on that. So hopefully we have all this right. And so to see if it is right, we're going to just initially use it for down here. So say update UI, and we're going to pass in the string, the item name. Well, this is for our empty slots. So there's not, the item name is going to be empty slot, which is what's used for the sprite image as well. And then slot number. Slot number is actually up there, slot num. And the last piece we need is the index, which is I. So we can comment out these two. Just call that. And provided we copied everything correctly, that should work. And then if it does, we'll go back and change this part to use that as well. Although that's going to be a little bit different with what parameters are passed in. So let's save that. I think we're getting close to a home run here. What do you think? Things are starting to look up with this. Sorry, I didn't have the chat open. I just opened up the chat. So if anybody was over there saying anything, I apologize. Just retype it, please. I had the wrong thing. I had my main video channel screen up, but not the one with the chat, not the live. All right, so this object list assigned. What's the value number? We'll have to look at that. See what's up. All right, so we got our empty slots. Great. Just sitting here waiting for our items to spawn. Pick up. Pick up. Pick up. Damn, this thing is so hard. Look, I'm hitting the wrong keys, I think. Pick up. Let's get that gun. Pick up. Bottle of water. Pick up. We might not make this one. Pick up. So we should have 2 bottled waters. We do. So we have 2, 3, 4, 5 items. We picked up all 5. So boom. Yeah, there we go. Now we're moving stuff around like we should. No extra image showing up. That's all fine and dandy there. So let's move that there. Boom, we got an empty slot, 0. 2 items there, 1 there. Alright, so I think we have it working now. What do y'all think? Let's move that out of there. Yep. I said we got it working, folks. Can we drop it off the side of the screen yet? Boom. That's the other thing we're going to have to figure out, because the drag and drop system, apparently when you move off the thing, it no longer reports back information. Let's clear this. Let me show you what I mean. If I take this, drag, drop here, nothing shows up. Drag, drop here. It's because there's no drag and drop. The interface is not implemented out there in the game world or even on the back of this. So I almost thought about changing up our UI a little bit here for this, and putting like a trash can somewhere, trash can icon, you just drag it to the trash can. But instead, what I think I'm going to do is, if you right click on an item, or maybe we'll click an item, just click the item, it'll put a little line around it so you know which one you're on. That's the next thing we'll work on, is when you left click, it highlights or puts a box around the item so you know it's selected, and then you just hit delete on the keyboard and it'll delete that item out of the inventory. So yeah, that's the next order of business. So I think we're coming along pretty good here. Let's expand that a little bit so we got a bigger view here. Take that, slide it over. Can we slide it over to the right? Will it let us? No, I guess we can just go up and down, and that's it. Let's grab that bat, pick up. pickup. Boom. 2-item pickup. Look at that. We're good. Pickup. Alright, so we got us some items, some more items. Still got a gun there. Let's get that. Pick it up. Let's run. Let's jump. Oh, we jumped through the roof. Did you see that? There's no collider on the rooftop, so you can actually, if you can get up on the counter, you probably could jump up and out of the building. Alright, so let's run. Speed run. And pop up our inventory. There we go. We collected the additional guns. So I want to stack all our guns together. Keep them down here. Keep our ammo here. We need access to those drinks. We don't really need that bat. If we load our guns as attachments, do you think we could do a triple shot? That'd be nice, right? We'll drop our bullets right here. That'd be auto load. But no. The next thing to implement, obviously, is to finish this out, is preventing items from getting moved around in the slots that they shouldn't. For example, the bat cannot move anywhere other than the secondary slot, right where it's at, or out here, or over there, or over here, or over there, or over there. It should not be able to be moved into any one of these primary weapon slots or attachments like it's doing right now. Same with the guns. Like I said, we're going to work on that. I think we've come a long way, though. Starting to look almost playable. I'm starting to see features evolve that are making it look playable. And in a way, we've got a great... We're building some scripts that almost can be reused in other games or another game. So yeah, that's our basic UI. I to close. Let's run back and pick up some more items. The one thing I didn't, yeah, I did put that check in there. If the inventory gets full or slots are full and it's trying to add a new item, it will stop and it won't let you add it. That was in there. That was one thing I thought about the last time when I got all this inventory working, what it was adding, and I was like, wait a minute, what if it gets to the end and I forgot I had a check in there. Okay, so P for pickup. 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 We need to get some sounds in here though, right? Some crazy little sounds. How are we looking? Ooh, we got an attachment for the gun. We got a clip now. It's looking good though. Thank you, Unity, for putting out a great tool. This is awesome. Just some of the things that can be done with it. It really does let the person that has the creative mind come up with whatever game they want to implement. And with a little dedication and a little work, trying to go through and understand, and you start thinking about stuff, you know, you can definitely get it to work well. Alrighty. So then, well, let's see. Yeah, we're getting inventory here. Let's drag this stuff down here toward the bottom. Let's see if, just make sure when we add items, is it going to continue to add? It adds in the first available item, which will be the quick slots first that are empty. And then down here, it goes sequentially from S1. You've seen the code. Starting, once it determines stuff can't go here, it's going right here in order. So we are generating random items in all 5 spawn spots here. Yeah, I might change the pickup key, because not very close to your finger, you know, and so it does make it difficult to pick an item up. Come on. Whoop, it despawned on us. No, there it is. Yeah, so yeah, it stacked up some items and gave us a new clip. Yeah, so I'm definitely happy with the way this is looking. Do we even have a first aid kit? It may be the first one that came out here, to be honest with you. Look at that, we picked up 3 items in one lucky move. I noticed there's a short delay sometimes when you hit that zone and you get out of that zone before the trigger is deactivated. It's like it's activated for a certain period of time and it's not instantaneous. Yeah, so let's just fill this inventory up and then we'll call it a day. Just fill this up. Taking a sip of my cold coffee. Let's get that. All right. All right, so let's definitely close it at this point. I'm gonna call it quits right here. Perfect. So we made some progress. So like I said, the next thing we're going to do is some logic, some if statements, making sure items don't get swapped to a certain place that it shouldn't. So I'll work on that. It's going to be really by category. Items are the way we did the matching up was by category. So what I'm going to look at doing is taking the code that we had in the like I did with this code here, stripped it out. Oh, let's update that real quick. I'm sorry. Let's go inside the if. Getting the objects right here. So yeah, this can go away because I don't believe we're needing that now. It's actually inside. So this is the way it was. Let's put this here. And what we're passing in here now is really just this item name right here, the inventory. That's the only thing that's different. Instead of empty slot, we're passing in the item name. Slot number is the same. The index is still going to be the same. So what we can do is just comment out this code from here to here. And this little update UI just makes it cleaner and easier to read. We'll handle all that. So let's save that real quick and just test that. I hate to end it at a point where I've made a change and it breaks everything. Let's do a maximize on play so we get a good view of this. So we need to pick up a few. We need to wait for some items to spawn so that we can go ahead and pull in some inventory. And then we'll try to swap the items and just make sure all that works now that we... Nice silencer right off the bat. I like it. First aid, way to go. And is that, what, a clip? Man, we got lucky there. 2 attachments on the first run. Nice. Yeah, so we're going to swap this to here, that to there, that to there. It seems to be working. Move this out, move that out. Put that there, which we're not going to allow it to do it at a later point. That can go back there, 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 there. Swap these 2 items, swap those 2. Swap those. Yeah. Boom. Boom. Yeah, it seems to be working good. We want there. I'll probably have a set of binos there at some point. Jerry cans, no big deal on those. Oh wow, look at now all the first aid showing up this time around. It's truly random for sure. So we got a pistol here. Nice, we need that. So now we got our attachments with our pistol. This would be a nice screenshot right here. I think I'll screenshot this right now. Print screen. I like to go into Paint. Paste that in. Yep, I got that. I'm going to use this as the screenshot for the or the thumbnail thing view of the for the video when I end this. All right, so let's end that right now. So we got things looking up. Sounds great. I appreciate everyone stopping out. And like I said, I'll get moving on the few changes we need to make sure the items do not get put in the wrong slot on the first 6, the attachments, primary, secondary weapons, and all that. The other slots are working fine. It doesn't matter where things go there, based on our rules in the game for the player inventory. But the first 6 slots are critical that we only let certain items go there in certain slots based on their category. So I'll make the changes to that code, and we'll implement the delete option, which right now will be, like I said, it'll be the click an item and just hit delete, click delete, click delete, delete in the keyboard. That'll take the item out of the inventory. Actually, it'd be nice to be able to drop it. And put it back out there in the game world, but do that at a later time. Right now, when we become multiplayer, yeah, that would be a nice feature to be able to drop an item to let another player pick it up. That means we need to drop it and restart a spawn timer. And it also means that we'll be able to spawn that object right there, creating a spawn on the spot. Really just instantiating an object right there at that spot. I don't necessarily need a spawn for it. As long as we get the player's world coordinates, XYZ, which in the third-person controller, it's what you call a pivot or origin of that object, of the player object, of the avatar, is at its feet. So when we get that value, it's the XYZ that's at the player's feet. And so we can bump that up by a little bit to spawn an item just above the ground, just a little bit. And yeah, we could drop it there and respawn it right there at that location. So I'll have to create a spawner system that would allow you to spawn on the fly. That's the next spawn feature. Let's finish up our player inventory, and then we'll move on to another series after that. We're going to have, obviously, one more stream, and I'll just showcase the changes that I've made to remove items out of the inventory. I'll probably create a function to remove the item out, and then it'll be used in multiple ways. Like one, when you just want to delete it out, but two, if you use, for example, a consumable item, you use that item and it has to be removed from the inventory. That same function can be called to remove it. So it's going to be various reasons why an item would be removed from the inventory, but the process of removing it will be the same for all those ways or reasons why. Anyway, thanks again for joining. I'm signing off. Y'all have a good night. If you need, if you got a question or you need something answered or need me to explain something a little bit more that I went over, feel free to type out a question or a comment on the video. Definitely subscribe so you can be notified when I come back live again. I've been trying to do live sessions every day. Sometimes I want to just get into some programming and coding and come up with some ideas before I actually get live and do it or implement it. And in some cases, I'll actually implement it off stream. But I'm trying to do, at least get a start so I have a direction to go in. So when I get on stream, we can actually be going through some code and setting things up without wasting a lot of time about thinking how are we going to do it. So anyway, thanks everyone for stopping out, and I will see you on the next stream. Cheers, people. Let me use an XSplit. Sometimes the thing pops in my way. Sometimes, and that's why sometimes it'll sound like I'm like not here or lost, for example, and what I'm going to say or do. It's because I get something in my way here that I'm looking at, and I lose my train of thought a little bit. But anyway, thanks again, everyone. Take care.